Wonderful. Thank you, Taymoor. Thank you. So now the students they had advanced sight of some of the speakers' ideas. So they prepared a question each for them. So Seamus, speaking to the mic, and if you don't mind saying when you finished with Art History Link Up and what you're doing now, that would be great as well.
I finished with Art History Link Up last year, and now I'm still in my second year of A-levels. So yeah, I'm just wrapping that up. And I'd like to ask Michael a question about how, after someone is born, how we can like encourage their creativity to survive throughout their entire life, and the way how, obviously, you've all been talking about how that is quite under threat at the moment, but how can we like effectively encourage like the childlike kind of wonder of creativity over time, or the whole life?
Yes, we spoke about this a little earlier, and one of the things I said was that we are all at our most creative when we're infants, and we start losing it almost immediately. Because what happens, my feeling about what happens in education is that the young are very young children are amazingly creative. Virtually all children are just stunningly creative. And when I was a student many years ago, I did teach a Saturday class for kids, and they were from about 5 to 12. And the kids would come in, but I put paper around the walls, they could draw on the walls, and then there was a table piled with crayons and paint, anything you could think of. And the kids would come in and I'd say, well, it's October, it's autumn, autumn leaves. The little kids would just go immediately to the table, grab the first thing that they found, and were on the wall working. No, they didn't speak, they didn't ask any questions, they just acted. And if they got a yellow crayon, they used yellow. If they got a blue crayon, they used blue. They didn't think, which color am I going to use? The older they got, by the time they were 12, the trees had to be brown, the leaves had to be green, the sky had to be blue. The little kids never think about things like that. It's not part of it. And in a sense, one of the things that I feel happens to people going to art school is a rediscovery of a kind of innocence of expression that gets lost in those as one gets older through the teenage years. One loses that feeling that one can do anything and that one has to follow the rules. And what part of what art education is about is liberating one from those received ideas. I'd just like to say one other thing, specifically with regard to the history of art. When I was a student in the 60s, I clearly remember that we all thought of ourselves as trying to make the newest art we could, to open a door that had not been opened. But we all saw ourselves as the inheritors of a great tradition of art. We were the children of the Renaissance. We were the children of the Impressionists, of the Modernists. We were there because we were because we were following in their footsteps. And it's the question of history in relation to art seems to me of extraordinary importance. And it does upset me that this does not have the same hold on people's imagination that it did on ours then. And I think it's incredibly important to understand in art that we are part of an ongoing, it's not just contemporary, it's an ongoing tradition. And it's important to remember that everything in art that's ever been made was contemporary once.
Thank you, Michael. Remi has a question for Jussi.
Yes. Oh yeah, I guess a bit of an introduction. So I studied art history with Art History Link Up a time before Seamus. So I graduated in 2022 and I'm studying classics at the moment, classics at Oxford. And I'm trying to shoehorn in as much art history as possible. So I'm looking at the art of the Greek, Roman, Anatolian, and North African worlds in an ancient context. Yeah, and I had a quick question for Jussi, actually. So you touched on upon internal art policies within galleries and museums in regard to the I guess, entry-level jobs, but I kind of wanted to zoom out and think about wider art policy. And I had a question, which I'm sure is on everyone's minds, in relation to, I guess, burgeoning and new coming technologies like AI and the blockchain, and how, of course, policies impact the landscapes of like in which they're implemented. So I was just wondering how you think new policies and reactions to these new technologies might change the landscapes, change the landscape of the art world.
Well, it's interesting because I wondered sometimes when we worry about those that believe in the STEM subjects, whether they might have an ounce of creativity in them and shift their emphasis away from the naturally scientific to the naturally artistic and create different platforms for us to share great images of 21st century and great classical works of art, and to create dialogues and global platforms for us to look at each other's cultures in a different way, in a more viable way. I think when Michael was a student, he would have been looking at books and they would have been mainly printed in black and white or bad separations. I grew up looking at bad color film, but there were some great things like interviews with Francis Bacon in his studio and Freud and others, which were very inspiring. But today, new technology allows us access to all types of things. So I think it's about content. And I'd like to see better content about art and culture available to everyone online. And I know that Christie's has looked at this, and there are members of the team here that have been in Christie's education for many years that have been working with this. And during COVID, we had a free program for the arts, which was set online. And I think more of that should be done at governmental level. And I think to your point about AI and the development of the artistic side of that science, I think it's already in a very good place. And they've moved leaps and bounds. And obviously there are works of art that we sold in my time at Christie's, continue to sell, that are created digitally and in a digital space and sold in a digital space and are on blockchain, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a brave new world out there. And I think there's a moment where some of the more classically trained artists will find it irresistible to step into that space and to create partnerships with those people that develop the platforms to create something great for all of us. And I promise you, we don't know what it is now, but it will be there. Just as 10 years ago, we didn't really understand the power of our mobile phones and what that would bring us. And to your point about scanning, how many images do you think we scan a day? 10,000. We're getting used to it. We're being trained to do it. So how do you use that training in a creative way to make us all more aware of ourselves and to do some of the things that Michael was talking about discovering ourselves through perhaps the channel that STEM offers us?
Thank you, Jussi. Let's resolve to come back in 10 years and see what's happening.
Exactly.
Sabrina.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sabrina. I graduated Art History Link Up in 2021. It was COVID year. And I currently am a finalist at King's College London. And Taymoor, what you said about Mickey Mouse degrees really resonated with me because I do arts and humanities and I constantly get told, what are you going to do with that? And as many people who work in the arts and humanities know the feeling. You talked a little bit about how much we see every single day, and I think there's definitely a skill being lost in being able to critically analyze art as art history education is lost. And that critical analysis towards art can definitely be applied to critically analyzing any form of art in life. And I wanted to know what you thought about the inclusion of art into STEM. So the newly branded STEAM that's kind of coming into play, and how do you think governments could work with that instead of STEM?
I think it's very welcome. I think, and to be very, very clear, I'm not anti-STEM. I think it's a wonderful thing to study engineering. What I'm very anti is that there is some kind of false battle between STEM and art. And if there's anyone in history to prove what those two things together look like, it's Leonardo da Vinci. The kind of aspiration of the Renaissance individual who can bridge those. So the two things are very linked. And I think what is dangerous is the split between the two. What's also dangerous is to put commercial value to what you study. I think it's very dangerous. I think, being able to pursue what you feel is for you, what you're passionate about, is a privilege. And I think it's something that I can say is a privilege, but it's something that we should be encouraging and through things like Art History Link Up, enabling. I think if you're in a world where the only point of studying anything is in order to get a job that you can afford to live on, is a very sad place to be in overall. So I very much welcome dialogue and concepts that start to take away from this STEM versus art, and something like STEAM sounds like a good way of doing that.
Thank you, Taymoor. And talking of dialogue, you've inspired Michael. He wants to add a statement.
There was something that I just learned over years of teaching, and that is that it's interesting to me that what one really learns in education, one is not the subject that one's studying, but the way in which it's taught to you. That's what you learn. If you're taught in certain ways, and certain subjects demand to be taught in certain ways, that is how you will think for the rest of your life. And one of the things that's so interesting about art education is it asks a different question. So it creates a different way of thinking. And it's not the subject, it's the way in which you're taught that teaches you.
Yes, well, I would agree very much. Wonderful. Maddie.
Hi, I'm Maddie, and I graduated Art History Link Up in 2020. I'm currently studying my master's at the University of Sussex. And my question is for Katy. And I'm wondering what you think about community and culture, because when I was at Art History Link Up, the most important discussions were with my peers. And I really believe community is what's going to bring the arts together.
So I think community is absolutely paramount. And I think I've been really fortunate recently to see the real value of that twofold. Sort of one is in the community that I've been building through our platform with the WIC, because I think what I've realized through these discussions and through having this publishing platform and community is how many people were actually missing from the conversation. People from different backgrounds, people from different races and places who maybe have not had the traditional trajectory in education or in socioeconomic factors or an ability to be in the rooms that we're all often finding ourselves in, and whether that be ways in which we can increase that community through technological access, through mentorship, through environment, I think is absolutely key. And I think also communities are key on a public level, and we're seeing that a lot more in museums, and this need to build actually public communities and really a recognition of why centres for education, for learning, for growth, for free access are extremely important. And I think in a working sense, on a private sense in business, and Taymoor will probably say the same as well, is us creating our communities within business as well, and actually helping to open up the envelope around what art history is and the breadth and depth of different places that you can find it. And so often those communities can be found in unexpected places, and often in corporates. You know, there are amazing corporate communities that are really celebrating history of art. There are businesses that are actually opening up the way their communities engage, the way they're having conversations. A really interesting one is the iconic fashion brand Burberry, which has actually been sponsoring the British Pavilion and a Comforters Pavilion, if anyone went to Venice to see that, and looking at how they invest in mentorship and education. And by doing that, what they're doing is they're able to create this concertina effect of community, which is not just about a luxury shopper. It's not just about people who are in their stores. It's actually building a sense of shared values, of kinship, of passion around a particular topic and a subject. So I think community is so important in every single way.
Wonderful. And we're really celebrating that community this evening. Thank you, Katy. TK.
Hi, I'm TK. I am one of the older alumni. So I left Art History Link Up in 2018 on the AS program, and I'm currently working at the National Portrait Gallery as the Learning Program Assistant. And I have a question for Sir Michael. I was wondering, as an artist, you have a really important role as someone who's continuing the timeline of art history today. What would your advice be to young artists who might feel like they have to dilute or kind of give up their creative practice in some way in order to pursue something that's perceived as more stable or business orientated within the arts?
Again, difficult question. I think it's very challenging to want to be an artist, and I have never advised anybody to be an artist. I have always said, if you have an alternative, try the alternative. But because the only way that it's really sustainable is some kind of slightly absurd, passionate desire to do it, because it's very difficult to sustain a sense. You need self-confidence, you need self-awareness, you need discipline. There's an idea that artists are kind of undisciplined people. You have to be the most disciplined person to be an artist, because frankly, you get up in the morning, nobody cares whether you go to the studio. Nobody cares. Unless you do yourself, and unless you're driven to do that, and that is the only thing you want to do. And if that is the case, you will be able to do it. If there's that alternative, believe me, eventually you'll go to the alternative.